Now we're going to move on to databases in Azure. First, we're going to get started with relational databases, which you might be pretty familiar with. So when we walk through these databases, some of these might be ones you've already used. Then we're going to move on to NoSQL with CosmosDB. This is just another database, and the format of how this data is handled is a little different, but we'll see that in a second here. So for relational databases in Azure, these are the four most popular options. And out of these four, Azure SQL is pretty popular, mostly because a lot of folks who are Microsoft product users usually come from a Windows environment, and in Windows, the popular database there in Windows development is SQL Server. So Azure SQL is kind of the SQL Server engine in the cloud. It's really popular, but there are other popular options such as MySQL, Postgres, and MariaDB. And the great thing about all of these is they all kind of have that same feature set of automatic scaling, automatic backups, so you don't have to worry about configuring those yourself. Now, if you did want to configure a little bit more, that is available to you. Another great thing about using relational databases in Azure is that if you decide that you want to maybe use one of these in the cloud, and maybe you have some data on premise on a local server that you want to migrate to the cloud, and you go ahead and do that, for the most part, all you have to do is just change the connection string and use to be able to use it in whatever existing system that you might have. So what that essentially means is that you can use the same tools and languages that you love. All you're really doing is just changing the location of where your data is. Now say that you need maybe some more things like compute power or some more control over the environment of where your database is being used and deployed. You can also deploy them to virtual machines. And in Azure, there's a bunch of templates to help you do that so that you can kind of configure and tweak your virtual machine to the right compute power and any additional things like virtual machines, or excuse me, the operating system that you'd like to use. Those are available for you to tweak and deploy with your database as well. So it really doesn't matter, what you use. It's really down to, what database that you're comfortable with. Also, one of my favorite features about databases in Azure is that they all come with some more intelligent analytics that will check on your performance, any security threats that you might have, which is a really great option, and also an option if you want to turn it off and don't want to see that as well. But it's really helpful if you are maybe realizing that maybe some of your queries or jobs are running a little slow. It's a really great option to kind of take a look and see what's going on. With CosmosDB, this is the NoSQL offering in Azure. And it's a multi-model database where you essentially choose your own API. So this could be table, which is just essentially a key value store, SQL, MongoDB, Gremlin, Cassandra, really up to you. And it also has really integration with Spark and Jupyter Notebooks. You just essentially enable it with a click of a button. And then another really great feature about CosmosDB is this idea of global distribution, so that your data gets replicated to where it's used the most. And this helps with things like low latency, so that your data gets to its destination a lot quicker than it would if it stayed in maybe the same data center in a certain place. So CosmosDB, again, as I mentioned before, is the NoSQL offering. It's a little different from relational databases, but it has the same kind of premise on how you store your data. So in this example of NoSQL, on the left here we have this entity relationship graph of this orders table and this order details table. So normally, for somebody who's traditionally worked with relational databases, this might look very easy to replicate in MySQL or Postgres or any relational database. But in NoSQL, on the right here, this is what it would look like. So notice that order details is a part of orders, right? So that's the relationship, and so it's inside of this order here. And notice that it looks a little bit like JSON. So if any of you are familiar with any like web development or specifically JavaScript, you'll see this looks very similar to JSON. So that's one interesting piece of NoSQL. And again, just an option, and this is also this option. This is what it will look like in CosDB if you decide to use it. So again, CosDB is an option if this is a format that you're comfortable with. So to conclude databases in Azure, again, you have options for relational that include Azure SQL, Postgres, and MariaDB, and you get features like backup security, and these are all built in. They're no extra configuration for them, and they can be used in virtual machines if you'd like a little bit more control over the entire environment. And with NoSQL, you essentially choose your own API. You have integration with Spark and Jupyter Notebooks, and then you also have the same feature set as relational databases. But the main difference in terms of like the things that you get built in is that Cosmos DB has that global distribution feature that allows you to replicate the data and put it closer to where your users are.